Welcome to the Westside Barbell podcast. Today's guest is Bobby Kaleal. Bobby is the Director of Performance at the Spire Center. Bobby, pleasure to have you here.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start a little bit differently in that, what's it like being the Director of Performance at Spire?
It's been a journey. It's that's a good place to start. It's been about 7 months, and it's so everyone understands Spire is this massive like seven. I'm gonna screw it up, but it's 715,000 square feet of indoor space.
Wow.
Of like pretty much sports performance, and with arguably 3 pools, 1 an Olympic-sized pool, 2 a rec pool, and 3 like these like therapy pools that are big, like deep tubs with old like treadmill,
Like underwater
treadmills and cold tubs, hot tubs. And it's in Geneva, Ohio.
Why was it built?
So it was this gentleman, Ron Clutter. He created this because he loved, and I'm gonna mess this up too. So no disrespect, but because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have this position. And so he had this vision to create like this massive international Olympic training center. He was very successful in business apparently, but as he built this, it looks like I think he put like 110 million into it.
Wow.
And it just got away from him.
Yeah.
And then Geneva was stuck with this vacant building, half made. A lot of great events went there. And then a few years back, a gentleman came on in, Jonathan, and he just took this thing over, bought it at a fraction of the price, and believed in this concept and vision of wanting to make this like an IMG, this academy, at the same time, take advantage of what was there and start to provide events and showcase this place and clean it up. He has since purchased, hundreds of more acres of land there. He is building this thing out to where, from energy preservation and wanting to do like solar fields to 3 hotels are coming on site now. And we're just growing. And what he's doing is he's allowing this vision to happen there, this crazy in Geneva, Ohio. And so it's great because it's a rebirth of an area. But what it really is it's going to be this mecca of an indoor and outdoor training facility that is like no other.
What's your role? How do you fit into this future?
So everything's performance there, for the most part. There's a school and academy, just so you know, it's a 9th through 12th grade school and a post-grad school. And so we went from 37 people a year ago to 88 people now.
Okay.
And once we get more housing, it's going to grow. So I organize all the workouts, all the performance. My job is, as I sold myself, try to help them reach their potential mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, and, get them in the right mindset and focus, understand their body. And so, that's what I do. Every day they come in, they have a workout program, and every day they train with their team. In between there, they go to school, 9:30 to 2:30.
And are these athlete oriented? So everyone comes in, they're an athlete. What's the end goal for these athletes?
Probably scholarships, pros.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of Division I athletes, high level. We have 37 international kids.
Wow.
We have they're from everywhere. Egypt. We had another young lady just come in this week from Trinidad. It's amazing. Russia, Germany, everywhere. Australia.
Yeah.
And so it's growing. And next year, we're adding more dorms. And so what stopped us at 88 this year was our housing. We didn't have enough. So now next year we'll allow 160 kids because we'll have more housing. And so the goal is to continue to grow up to 700 kids.
Did the young Bobby Kaleal ever think this is where he would end up?
No, the young Bobby Kaleal did not. And he believes in, and the best part is, you think of director of performance, and I'm blessed because, and we'll get into my background, but it's like everything that I've worked on, I can do at this place now.
Yeah.
Spire's neutral, meaning we're not affiliated with a college. We're not an OHSAA school. We're this prep academy. So I'm like this neutral location that has every single thing it can offer for every single sport. We don't even have a football team. We've got a massive football field. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so And they want to grow more. You know, he wants to put in this 1.5 size foot FIBA Olympic soccer field. He wants to build a hockey stadium.
Yeah.
Like he's putting in like a few $100,000 wrestling room right now. And so, and I have the ability to start to do research, methodology, stuff with those who are athletes, stuff with those who just from schools or locations that want to come in, and I don't have any restrictions. Think about it. Like if you're at a university, there's restrictions if you want to do research studies. There's a lot of red tape, this and that. If I want to work and study and train and invite colleges up to try and test and do, or to bring high school coaches in, I have no competition with the high school coaches.
Yeah.
Because we're neutral. We're a propagate. We're going all over. This allows for me to now give back in a way of collecting data, offering tests and measurements, leveling a playing field for those schools who can't afford stuff, giving them ammunition via workouts, via data, via education that they may not be able to afford.
Yeah.
And now they're loving Spire. So hopefully they want to come to an event there. Hopefully they want to see and be a part of our vision. And so that's when I explained what I wanted to do with my background and with what they have to offer. I mean, it makes sense.
I think this would be a good time to go to the start and to give people an idea of your background, because you've been in the industry for over 20 years.
Yeah, about 20
You've got more degrees than I know. But what I want to know is, from the very start, did you always want to get into strength conditioning? Were you an athlete? How were you growing up?
So I was a degenerate. I graduated high school with a 1.5 grade point average. So I wasn't going to go to college. I just went down a real wrong road. And I was getting to a point where like enough was enough with the parents. You know, my parents were divorced, but still a great family. But I was just lost. And so I applied. I wasn't doing well in school, so I applied for like a 3-month EMT program, emergency medical technician ambulance. I was okay with blood. I thought, you know what? I can handle this. And I fell in love with it. I was like, oh my gosh, all right. Well, I got accepted to go to like this burn unit school in Florida to advance, paramedic, maybe be more of a burn unit specialized, get into it. I was an athlete. I grew up boxing, wrestling, but I was always ineligible.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't really do it. And so I got down there and I couldn't speak Spanish. And so I couldn't go to the school. So I was like, oh, geez, what do I do now? I tried to come here to change my life, And so my grandfather lived down there, and we trained thoroughbreds. So I ended up moving with him a little bit and trying to figure out what to do. And someone approached me and said, why don't you go to this massage therapy school? It's the ranked second in the nation, going to neuromuscular therapy. I'm like, I'm an EMT, So I went, got a little bartending certificate, became a bartender, applied for school. Ironically, someone just dropped out of the school to signed up. And they had this list, and I begged this woman. I'm like, I know this is weird, but I'm not supposed to be here. I didn't plan on this, but maybe I did, like one of those. Yeah. And she's like, you sign up right now, you could be in. Sign up right then. Committed to 9 months, 6 months of massage therapy school, and then 3 months of this neuromuscular therapy sports massage. 752 hours later, 5 days a week, 6 hours a day, I went, took a test, and became a massage therapist. And it was like, holy crap. But in between that time, here's the big picture. I moved out of my grandparents, and I moved in with this young lady. And 2 months in, and I got robbed. I came home, she was gone, everything was gone in my place, little note, oh yeah, by the way, we didn't pay rent. And I wasn't dating her at the time. What you did was they used to look for roommates that you would want. Yeah. And so when they go through a resume, they do a background check on you. So they did a background check on me, and boom, they hooked up people, and we were in Fort Lauderdale, and so you move in with people. Well, they hooked me up with the wrong roommate. Damn. And so I was driving to exercise, and I was just broke down. I was like, where am I going with my life? Like what, because it was right when I was trying to get into massage therapy school. Like it was right when I was like figuring out where am I going to go. And so I go to work out, and I see this gentleman there. He's like, hey, come to this Bible study thing. Went down this thing. I became a Christian 5-6 months later. I cruised through school. I fell in love with it. I instantly graduated. I wanted to get out of Florida. It was not a good experience other than becoming a Christian. I was on a mission. Yeah. Applied for school back in Cleveland, came home, changed my life, got accepted to Baldwin Wallace, went and got my undergrad. And then I applied right to Cleveland State, went and got 2 master's degrees in 1 year, and I didn't look back. I just focused. I was a new man. And everything else in life, I can't do anything, Tom.
Yeah.
No, I'm a stone cold idiot, dude, at everything else. A lot of people will back that up and tell you I am. I'm blessed to know the body. I'm blessed. And I'm not the smartest science guy either. I am blessed. And I made it a mission then to help and give from that point on. If it was going to come to me that easy, when I couldn't even pass English or do it, it's amazing to me. And so I made it my lifelong mission to just do that. And that's, now I'm here.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind. It literally blows my mind every day.
Well, when we met, is that chunk in the middle wasn't your average chunk either. Like, how did you get your degree, and how did you end up? Because we met at Strong Style, for those of you who don't know. What was the journey to Strong Style?
So, great story. Well, that's how I lost my hair, I think, that's that part of it. And so I built up my business from 1999 up until 2007-8. I had 11 trainers. What I did is I took a philosophy of the holistic approach of like health and wellness, the massage therapy approach, the neuromuscular approach, and I mixed it with the scientific approach of what I exercise science, and I just tried different things and opened up. Well, I ended up in 2007-8 after moving. I grew my gym about 5 times we moved. And the 6th one, I moved into like my dream gym. It's 2008. Had 11 trainers working for me. We were rolling. 20,000 square feet, had a boxing ring. That's how I ended up meeting Sean Porter, and that started my journey. And I was developing a cancer program. I was working with people who were sick, terminally ill cancer patients, and it was like I just did a medical-based research study with 6 to 16-year-old cancer kids, post-therapeutic cancer kids, post-chemo cancer patients from Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. And we were doing this on a program I wrote on heart rate training. And we had amazing results. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on to something. And I was on this mission to build all these programs and to be able to, I always believed that movement can heal anything. And it was just one of those, and good energy can heal anything. And so I was going down that road in 2008 came, I just gambled all my money in this 20,000 square foot space with all this stuff. I started my programs. We started our corporate wellness program, and we were working with different companies. It was amazing. Yeah. And then 2008, the economy slammed down. Lost everything 1 year later. Shut our gym down. We lost all of our school contracts because there was nothing. No one was doing personal training. All of our school contracts were done. Our corporate wellness was done because no one was doing everything. There was businesses being laid off left and right. And so I went bankrupt. And it was like, oh my gosh. But it dawned on me as I was going through that year, and I was begging and pleading for money, and I was looking for ways to make more, and I was losing trainers because I couldn't really pay because they were losing training money. Yeah. They were going to get real jobs. My faith kept saying, deal with the scars. You got to stay. This is part of the mission. And I couldn't accept it. Every day for 22 years, I get up at 4:15, 4:30 in the morning and get to work by 5. And I hate it. But it's a mission. Don't get me wrong. But it's a blessing. You know what? Because I'm lucky to have a job and work. And so it flipping dawned on me that all these people are losing their jobs. All these people, I'm hearing stories after story from my clients who their husbands are losing their jobs, and what are they going to do? And their businesses are closing down, and it's like, and I'm losing everything at the time, but they're there for me, so I'm supposed to stay motivated and keep them fired up. And it, out of nowhere, I shut everything down, and in a weird, crazy way, and my wife will not agree with this, it was hard, from a marriage perspective, from a relational perspective, gambling, all this stuff, and doing stuff where, without her even knowing, as I grew this 20,000 square foot gym. Yeah. But, and I was getting headhunted to go get other jobs, to get out of the market, Bobby, go, but I couldn't. Something kept telling me, you now have this scar. you have this, you went through this 1.5 grade point average and proved yourself wrong and got these degrees and all these certifications now. Now you help all these people with the cancers and you work with these people, these athletes, with Sean Porter, where I was going with it. And maybe now you're starting to talk corporate wellness, but do you know stress? Can you really relate to stress? You need to feel this pain. You need to lose everything. You need to truly see if you're going to be a man. Can you come back from adversity? Can you persevere? Can you keep your dreams going? You helped all these people. You're not the screw up Bobby Kaleal why the economy went down. No. This is something you have to deal with and go through in order to be the person that you dream you can come. And that's what I did. I pushed through it. A blessing to this day. A gym closed. So did mine. They left everything in there. We got a phone call. We moved in and opened up Health 360. And I slowly built it up. I had other partners I brought in then. And we slowly worked its way up. And I was on a mission, though, to change my life, though. Like, I was more than just a gym at that time then.
Yeah.
I realized that I had to pursue something. I had to grow this to where I didn't want to lose it again. Software, technology. And so it's 2012. I lost everything 9-10. I'm starting to grow back 10-11 Health 360. And at the time I said I did that medical-based research study earlier. I applied for this patent. And it was in heart rate training. And I created a program where if you stay in your heart rate range a certain amount of time, over 30 minutes, and we did a research study. We got statistically significant results, and we hired an outside company to do it on like 14 areas. And so from blood pressure to this to that, and I was like, holy crap, I think I'm kind of onto something. So I applied for a patent because I realized, how can I get the heart rate onto a screen? And you couldn't do that with video technology. And how do I change a program for someone who, if I'm going to corporate wellness and working with these groups, and I got 6 truck drivers, well, they're all different. So they might have the same corporate wellness program, but it doesn't mean they have the same exercise program.
Yeah.
And so I had to adjust that all, but I couldn't do it with videos. So I started looking into avatar technology. I applied for this patent. I have 12 patents now in avatar guided technology, incorporating any Bluetooth enabled device. And we're in a process of growing this whole software side of it. But during that time then, I've been pursuing this dream, slowly working with different corporate wellness programs, consulting and working with different companies and groups, and trying to build up this, trying at the same time to build this software program to support all of this. Finally, well, no one in Cleveland believes in avatar guided. And when I say the word avatar to people in Cleveland, they're like, you got a third eye on your head. What the hell are you freaking talking about? It's not a technology, from 12, 13, 14. It isn't this big mecca of technology. And so it was hard for people to believe. And so I kept getting kind of laughed off the stage at events like, this will never happen. There'll never be avatar guided personal training or avatar guided this and that. You won't connect a heart rate monitor. And so I just accepted it, but didn't give up.
Yeah.
And so now these patents are finally coming to fruition. And so hopefully, the goal is that the world is going to start to see that there is a vision for this thing and there can be something special made. And so I've been building that. Well, at the same time, I started working with more military, tactical. I applied to become a government contracted employee and I ended up getting a contract with the Cleveland FBI. And now I work with the FBI Hostage Rescue Team in Quantico, Virginia. And so it's been since 2010 after losing everything, or 9-10, and coming back, it's been this same mission, trying to incorporate it a different way to give it to more and more people out there to benefit from. And all of a sudden, 7-8 months ago, I got a phone call to, hey, we need to find a strength coach. Can you help us out, Bobby? I'm like, yeah, let me come on out and interview. Let me help you find someone.
Yeah.
And I get there and they're like, hey, we would have our director of performance do this, but we really don't have one of those either. And I'm like, well, I'm looking to build up the software and find the right partner and grow it from there. I have nothing going on right now. Maybe I'll interview. But here's what I see with this vision. Here's what I think can happen here. I got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Let me throw it out at 6 hours worth of interviewing later, a couple weeks, and they said, hey, you want this job? So that's where I'm at.
There's so much to pick.
It's because we
from
went
this.
Stipe and strong style.
Yeah.
You know, what made, you know, in 2013, 14, I want to jump back because this is a big part of this is I met Marcus.
How did you end up in Cleveland?
I've been in Cleveland my whole life.
So, but so when you came back, you moved back, and
I moved back home to,
and that's where you set up your business.
correct.
Before we get into that, as a side, is this work ethic and all these different avenues your nonstop effort to never be caught in that position again, to where you have one stream of revenue or one business?
Yes.
Is that the main motivation factor for it?
I don't want one shot to sink my ship.
Yeah.
I don't. And I just believe I have more to give with the relationships I have now, and I believe in the sharing approach. So, you know, it just, I sleep better at night with that mindset.
The cancer patients research you did, how did that come about?
So we went and met with a couple doctors from university hospitals, Amanda Weiss Kelly and I got to know the name because it's insulting if I don't. Anyways, I'll figure it out. 2 doctors from, and they introduced me to Dr. Laterio, head of Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital at the time. We went in there, we had an idea, and he's like, I got some people for you. And we ended up doing a 12-week study with them.
And where did that idea, where did that come from? Was that just...
It was from the corporate wellness program that I created with the heart rate monitor training and the adults. I wanted to try it with kids, with sick kids.
Yeah.
And what do you have to lose if you're sick like that? Why not try to get you moving and up and out of that hospital bed? Why not find something? And that's what he wanted. He wished he had something, you know, and he wished he had something to exercise the kids in the hospital bed while they're going through chemo.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and because again, at the time when I was going through school for massage therapy and going to sports med at Baldwin Wallace and through Cleveland State, like I was learning about this cancer welfare program out of California. And I was in love with it because of the mindset of breathing and exercise and energy. But no one ever talked about exercise and not about exercise of truly ripping up the muscle. But yes, when you do rip up the muscle and you put nutrients in it, it's going to rebuild and grow and get stronger. So what if we could slightly tax it and pump massive blood flow through there with nutrients and force feed them food when they're going through chemo? And it works. It worked.
What were your objectives, and then how did the results reflect that?
So the whole objective was to hope that everyone got through. There was only like 8 kids, I believe, if I remember at the time, and I think 6 people finished, and 2 of the kids got mainstream back in their sport 1 year previous than what was expected, and it was one young lady didn't do so well, and she was going blind and did. So she had some problems and had to leave. The one young man who was in the program for years, it was the greatest results because he was around kids and hanging out and got to participate. And it was something he was never able to do.
Yeah.
And those were the simple results, was the joy, the happiness, the fact that they could do it, the confidence we gave them. And to me, that was my victory. So...
Then did this set up how patients were treated following up from that? What came from that?
So it was 7, 8, 9, and so then I started losing everything. So that kind of put it on pause. Then I went back and, the greatest story is, the saddest one sometimes, but like Mary Buell and Connie Waxman are my stories of people who, all I would do, like people would get sick, I'd stretch massage them, work them out with rubber bands, boom, 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 get them healthy again and move on to the next, and I think the biggest testament is to Connie Waxman, who was diagnosed with cancer and, clinic didn't want to do anything with her. They gave her like a 2 to 4% chance of pancreatic cancer to survive. And Neil and her were like my best friends. I trained their kids. And I said, let me just try some stuff. 7 years later, she did pass. But it was 7 amazing years of, and I want to get emotional because those are defining characteristics. Those are the tears. Those are the joys of, she was happy to get 1 year. She was told they couldn't do this, that, and the other, and we were, and what made it so amazing was that her husband and kids were so relentless on their mindset of trying new medicine, getting out there and doing holistic stuff. Well, at the same time, I was dealing with a woman named Mary Buell. She passed at 34. Again, an amazing young lady who trained with me for years, came down with this, but she met someone, Derek, her husband, and she was sick and didn't know if they were going to be able to have kids, this or that. We ended up fighting through things. She ended up going into remission, getting pregnant, having a baby, healthy kid now. You know, unfortunately, she passed, but that's her victory. Like, she had a baby, she had a boy, she left a legacy. Like, that's, as hard as it's to talk about, it's like those, forget the athletes. You know what I mean? Those are the stories. That's the motivating factor. And so when you see that at that level, all it does, Tom, is guide me. Every time I sit and talk to people, it eliminates the excuse of what they're going to say to me. You're not going to give me an excuse when I see and work with people who die while I'm laying with them. And for years, they fought so hard over the simplest, littlest things to hope to breathe one more day. And that was awesome for them, you know, or to give them a little more feeling to know that they're not going to throw up after they get this next freaking chemo thing, you know, and worry about how they look in the mirror with all that. You're going to sit there and tell me you can't make a workout. You're going to tell me something, this little thing hurts or that. You're going to try to make excuses why you want to be here. Forget it.
Yeah.
It made my life so much easier in the way that I presented myself to adults, to groups, to executives out there, to family members, to spouses, to others. It truly changed. It is the critical piece of a puzzle of my life. If it wasn't for Connie and Mary, I wouldn't tell the same story. Maybe, you know, but yeah.
How did this segue into? So you went from, you had this, the economy went down the hole. Then you saw an opportunity. You realized that you could handle stress, that you changed your mind on how you approached dealing with stress. You set up 360.
Correct.
Then Sean Porter was one of the first athletes who comes in.
Yep.
Then where did the bridge come across to Strong Style?
Great question. So Sean was right before we shut down, and at the old gym, that's how I met, because we had a boxing ring there. Mm-hmm. So they came in with Joey Delguide and them, and it was great. And then I continued to train Sean physically, and then they would go spar at Strong Style. I met Marcus years earlier accidentally because I went and introduced myself when he had Dick Tracy's studio, this karate studio or martial arts studio. And I went and met him not knowing him.
Yeah.
But we left on good terms, like, hey, if you need any help, I'm around. He's like, I'm pretty good right now. I'll be up the road if you need me. He's like, hey, great. You know, I don't, but thank you. I walk in there, I meet him, and someone reached out to me while I was training Sean and said, you know, why don't you work with Stipe? He hurt his back. You know, maybe there's a way. And I said, well, let me just ask Marcus. How's that sound? Yeah. I went and met Marcus. We had a great heart-to-heart. You know, he's, you know, his mindset. You know, Marcus Marinelli's a, you know, self-made, hard-nosed, you know, it's about the work you put in. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He's not looking for you to give approval. He's going to prove it. He's going to show you. And so his whole point was, you want to come here? We're not competitors. Your gym's way over there. Help out my guys. You make a deal and help me out. And in return, let's see how this goes. And, you know, I opened up to every type of training. I threw it on the table because I loved his philosophy about hard work and no excuses, you know what I mean? And lay it on the table, and there's no lies, there's no deception. Look me in the eyes when you're talking to me type of an approach. Is in some areas where I was a little weak. He gave me the confidence to open it up. I then gave him everything I believed in, from agility, quickness, reaction, and my philosophies. And he started teaching me the conjugate approach. He started teaching me the methodologies that he learned. And it allowed me, you know, his mindset and his background, his relationship, to see the way that he trains. And we put two brains together, and we started producing some really, really, really solid athletes. Mm-hmm. And it was all based on a trust in the beginning, because he was burnt a few times. I was, but we, again, as he said, just lay all the cards on the table, no secrets. Perfect. That's how I like it. And it worked out ever since. It's been look at it, a brotherhood now.
Oh, it's at the very least.
Yeah.
What was it like working with MMA athletes? Or what is it? Sorry, not what was it? What is it like working with MMA athletes?
Wrestlers, MMA, boxers, all a little different, but all the same. You know, it's a one-on-one sport, you know, mano-a-mano type, and it's super fulfilling, but it's such a sport that is so, I mean, think about it. We're training them to stay alive. We're training them to get this victory. Look at the pay they get. Look at the hours they're in the gym. You know, what I have found is that these athletes, some of these, when you get to that level, you know, you're a specimen. You're an athlete. You're the one percenters. You're the, you know what I mean? And I have found that it has to be an individualized program more so than anything, because from day to day to week, you could have a training program for 12 weeks. It is not going to be the same from day to day. Yeah. We have an overall plan, but from the warming up to the stretching out to the aches and pains to the diet and the weight loss when the camp goes on longer if you're not a heavyweight, you know, to all of that, it's so hard, but you get to appreciate the pain that they're enduring at such a greater level, because it is, think about MMA, you know, from submissions to striking to stand up to wrestling and ground and pound and to, you know, being able to breathe and again, lose the weight as you do this and try to stay healthy. It's tough to train, but I think it's only so many people can do it. I think it's a certain personality that can deal with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We talked about this off camera, but I want to touch on that MMA is close to both our hearts because of the athletes, not because of the training, because of everything else that's not strength and conditioning, right? And it was the one sport that I figured out that we're a tiny cog. We're important, but we're not just the cog. Yeah. But because of the position we're in, we are actually getting more access to every other aspect of this sport.
Right.
How has your training evolved knowing, and well, to give context, just say someone who's a pro fighter, everyone aspires to be in a pro organization, whether it's UFC, whether it's
Bellator,
BFL,
right.
Knowing all the other stuff you do now, in terms of when you turn up for fight week, you've got to cut weight, you've got media obligations, do you strategize for this in your fight camp or when you lead up to fight camp? How has all that evolved?
Yeah, big time. That's where performance comes in. That's where I feel I feel I'm a big piece of it now, where performance coaches are, because you're a performance coach. And again, if you, what's the definition of performance? You know, I don't know, probably 5 different ones, but again, mentally, are you?
Yeah.
Emotionally, with stress and life and family and friends and everything else. Physically, are we doing not just strength training when you think physically? Are you doing the appropriate training to support the body internally, externally, you know, from joints to muscles to your, you know, your on and on, you know? And, you know, how do you throw a certain phase in there? Is there such a thing as a type of training phase? But then you go to nutritionally, you know, and how much are you overloading certain nutrients based on the intensity of the day? How much are they? What vitamins at what point? You know, and then when you start to cut all that stuff, you know, you try to keep the nutrients in and make it more dense as the camp gets closer, because you got to cut the weight, you know, and then the water. And so, performance coaches, I think they're the middle. I think they're the central. The head coach is the key. Mm-hmm. He's the one making those decisions, doing all that. But the more that a head coach can rely on the performance coach, you know, to support what he does before, what he does in the middle, what he does after his training is over with, I think the more fine-tuned of a machine that person can be.
Do you think the performance coach is towards the final evolution of a strength conditioning coach, that's a natural progression that they should aim for, rather than just been focused on one area?
I do. I think, and I maybe, you know, I guess I look at the performance coach as that strength coach. I look at him as, you know, because you're dealing with, like, say for example, basketball. you could find a strength coach for basketball, specific to the sport for what it does. How do you, performance coach for MMA is a little bit different because again, it's you're taxing the body in all different arts and in all different ways. You're still burning the same. Okay, arguably, am I lessening basketball? Not at all. Please don't make any mistake for that. I just look at. I think performance coach. I think people. I think strength coaches. I guess I don't use the name the way I think. I think you are a performance coach more so now than a strength coach. It's not just about the strength it's the resiliency, it's the joint integrity, whatever you want to, but it's more so than just strength, I guess. So I guess I look at it as performance is a piece of the strength coach.
Yeah.
Or strength is a piece of the performance coach. Yeah.
Which makes sense to me because when I first got into strength conditioning, no one wanted to be in it. It was not a glamorous job. Like 4 o'clock starts. That's just average. And then your internships really dictated how you're going to end up. You could normally tell where someone interned from based on how they acted, how they ran a weight room, what machines they want in their weight room. And now we're in an age it's strange times that there's overlap between you're a trainer, you're a personal trainer, you're a strength influencer, you're a strength conditioning coach.
Right.
CSCS or CSCS used to be the be all and end all.
Right.
Now there's so many things, and that the term performance coach is popping up more, and it's popping up more towards people that I'm like, oh, like you have a lot of credibility because you have a lot of experience. I noticed it popping up initially in Formula One and car driving because they have one athlete. Well, they have a team, but each athlete's dedicated to performance coach who needs to do everything that you just said. It's not just physical training. Right. It's mental training. It's basically how can we make sure your life is as good as possible so you can be the best driver you can. And you're like, oh, and then COVID happened. I think a lot of pro athletes started feeling, well, we need someone to help us because we don't have the team, we don't have our own gym set up. And then you're like, now, if you're an athlete making millions of dollars and you don't have your own coach, right? It doesn't make sense.
You just do. You have one.
Yeah, and it's and you can see the way agents are changing how contracts are made. That you're not just locked into a team. You can actually have your own performance because it benefits everybody.
Sure.
Because it goes back to individualization.
Yeah.
You have to be trained as if you're, the individual you are, not part of a team. Because when you work with people, if you got 20 or 30 people, you're training for the general good.
Right.
It's impossible to do the specifics.
Right.
And I think once you learn how to work with specifics, it's easier to branch off the general rather than the way around. Because you can see people who are unbelievable working with 50 people.
Yep.
You give them 5, they have no idea what to do.
Right.
Because there's so much more data coming in.
Right.
What have been some of the biggest changes in the industry you've seen over the past 20 years?
Well, I look back at, I guess sometimes I get a little, as you get older, I find myself sometimes second guessing as I look the new versus the old. And so I like to look back at old videos I have. And what I think made me the trainer I was to get the followers and the backing that I had was the uniqueness and the approach to be open-minded to any type of training and to believe that the body has all these stimuluses. And so having the background I did with, to get to that point, it made it fairly easy. What I see changing now is you're having more of like technology is really coming into the equation here, but you're seeing more like sled pulling. There was a time where it was a bodybuilding type of a world as I was coming into it. Yeah. Powerlifting was huge, but it was separate. They were like on, two different sides of the equation, as they should be, and you didn't see a lot of this cross-training type of a discipline. Mm-hmm. You see a massive amount of it now. When you look at the example of a CrossFit type of an approach where, you're taxing the body, cardiovascular-wise and lactic acid-wise, and, you're hitting all the cylinders there. Yeah. I think that's where it's, really has come. And now when you can attach technology to it, you really are, that's where I think you're going to start to see philosophies coming true that maybe once were disputed or argued or were thought to be great when maybe not, they aren't so, they're not so great now. So I think you're seeing a lot of, there's, people say, there's a lot of new theories coming out there. I think there's just a lot of theories that have been adjusted, and massaged, like a little bit, they're a piece of clay that have been molded differently. And I think that that the change is going to be, the technology is going to prove or disprove some of the theories or methodologies or approaches that have been out there for so long.
It's has to be noted too that it's such a new industry.
So new.
Like since '76 is when information started really come mainstream, and you have a lot more people questioning initial, which should be done. It's science, right? You're trying to improve upon everything, but as you said, with technology, we got data, and from '76 we got more and more experience, and we'd be idiotic not to look at what everyone else has done and learn from if they made any mistakes. How do we improve upon them?
Right.
And kind of get to where we're at now, to where like they're not seismic shifts, they're more accurate shifts. That's the way I'm looking at it. Everything.
Right.
Everything is getting way more accurate. There's no more guessing. Even when we give out content, right? We try to give out content for general, and that's becoming more accurate.
Right.
And it's with being able to give out information, to do podcasts, to do like this wasn't a thing when same when you were in college.
Right.
Like this wasn't like no one podcast. The internet was. We're trying to scroll through stuff. Right. It's nothing like what it is now to gain access. So it's really there's no excuse not to be on top of the latest information.
It's true. Don't you think, Tom? Like when you look, like you think of how many people that we've learned from. Mm-hmm. Think of all those years ago, and think of when Louis was doing his research. Think of that. Like, I guess I think I see now. Like, there's a lot. We're gonna see that some people back then were a lot smarter than we even give some credit to. And if it wasn't for their outside thinking, if it wasn't for the trial and error and the scars and think of the equipment that's out there now that has been emulated or copied in the righteous way, some righteous, some not. You get it? Where they started with this machine, now it's morphed to this and to this and to this and to this. And if it wasn't for these guys here, and so I think that you're gonna see. Again, as the technology comes out, I'm hoping you see some of the grandfathers of, back then coming out in a way like, man, they were geniuses.
There's more yin to the yang. It went from a lot from academics. And you got to think, Louis, they had the gym in 1972. 1976 is just about when Alvin Roy, all these people became strength coaches. So we had basically one of the first garage gyms where it was just practical, learn by hard knocks with theory. And when you go to college, very rarely is this talked about, this practical aspect, because I'm not shitting on them, but the ACSM, NSCA, NASM, they give great guidelines. But I have met no professional athlete that ever goes 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2. Right. Again, it's to give guidelines. And now we're seeing, well, hey, there's more balance. What are these guys doing over here practically? And then Louis kind of pioneered the way of, well, I'm going to read all this stuff. I'm going to talk to all these coaches, all these athletes, get as much information, and then blend it into this system. Yeah.
And try it with a lot of people, which is the best way to get results, to see what works and what doesn't.
And then we get the benefit from it.
Right, exactly. And how many years later?
I know. Like, you got to think over 40, 50 years. And it's going to be exciting to see where it's going to be the next 10 years.
Right.
The one thing I wanted to circle back in, what is the importance of mentors in this industry to you? How important was any internships, any phone calls, any books you've read? How important was that to your journey?
Everything. Everything. Like for me, going to I went like 7 years in a row to club industry shows, and I went and studied under I was on a mission. That's everything for me. I want Bobby. I will go to his grave saying, I don't want to take any credit. I want to give credit to everyone. I'm just too stupid to remember everyone's freaking names. But if it wasn't for me being a sponge to want to learn, to try one little thing, it's the only way I learn too, I will say, is by trial and error.
Yeah.
If I have to go to a class, I have to take notes, or I'm not going to remember with my ADD brain all over the joint. And so it's mentors are everything. Good mentors and bad mentors. You learn what you don't want to become. You learn what you don't like, with the ones that are bad mentors, or maybe are they good? Because they're teaching you. That's what a mentor's there to do, to teach you what you want to become, or to teach you what you want to think about going into, or maybe it's going to teach you, I don't even want to go down this road. I don't want to become like you. So I think there's so much to mentors. So much.
What's your approach to work with a person or an athlete? Do you have a particular way from your experience of you first get introduced to an athlete? How do you know how to approach them, their training, and how to interact with them?
So that's a good question. So for me, I like to train. I always, let's start with an assessment approach. I don't always assess everyone. I get groups that come in here.
Yeah.
And so I'll give the example of, if we had like 12 or 18 kids in this soccer program came over for Spire. They came in from England or something. And so for me, when these groups come in, and even back in the day, I believe in an approach of slow warm up into, I like to do more balance and mobility. I then flow into an eye-hand coordination with balance and mobility. I then will go into strength movements. And in between every movement, I always do, every single movement, they will always do an auxiliary move of a fast twitch movement, or an eye-hand coordination and balance movement, or a mobility movement, stability movement. And then they'll go back to a main move. And it's been a philosophy that I take. So when I do groups, nothing changes. Then when they become our athletes, if they become our athletes, then we'll break them down, have time to do an assessment. And then in between those sets, like I said, where they would be doing a functional move, a balance move, they're doing a corrective move, or they're doing a move that was maybe an imbalance on one of their scores. And it's how I've trained everyone for all these years.
I kind of lobbed you up a curveball without giving you context. So what I've wanted to know since I've met you is, how did you approach Stipe?
Great.
How did you approach this athlete in this environment? Because it wasn't just Stipe. You have a very astute head coach in Marcus who's watching, and he reminds me so much of Louis, is that he studies, he watches, everything has to have a purpose.
Right.
And it's show me what you're going to do, what you have done. There's none of this, this is theoretical.
Right.
How did you approach that situation?
Good question. So Stipe was when I always, again, looking at the person like a Stipe, for example, he was a broken down. He was an amazing athlete who was broken down. His back was miserable at the time. He could barely kick high. His hamstrings were super tight. So it was let me break him down, let me loosen him up, and then let's see if we can let's take a base strength training program to where we moved out of deadlifts. We did more single leg elevated lunging and Bulgarian type squatting with, rear foot elevated work, to where I can work on his range of motion and mobility and stretch him in between every set. And then with the goal of trying to loosen up and strengthen at the same time. It was, for Stipe, it was, again, Stipe's personality, so we understand, is when he's committed, there's no one like him. He's focused, and so he is stubborn in that approach. And so, but when you ask him to try something, knowing that he wants to get better or it's going to serve a better purpose, he was 2,000% in. Yeah. It was amazing. And so Marcus and I identified his breakdowns and weaknesses. He allowed me to work on those. He helped build the strength training program based on taking out, these bilateral movements into unilateral movements and, individualizing the body parts, but knowing we needed to get the strength and power out of it to keep the strength up. And and so that was the approach. And then we came here, and that's when we did, the bottom line is it was being open-minded to where Stipe was in his career at the time, coming off of a loss, having his back being pretty much broke, and his hamstrings weak, is not turning on, and coming here and learning from you and John. We then took, the story I tell is we came here. Remember the reverse hyper story he did? He couldn't do 25s or 45s on the side. He couldn't. John did all this work on him. You had him pumping that hyper, and he ended it with 45 and a 25 afterwards and like 100 and some reps. And it was like the most mind-blowing thing. And you guys helped turn on and create. We needed to find the activators in Stipe. We didn't know where he was turned off and where he was turned on. And so we took this mindset of trying to heal. We took the mindset of trying to break down and create a strength training program opposite of where his weaknesses were. And then we came and learned from some of the best. And what was it? 6 months later, he was
on a rampage.
That was it. We never looked back. He took the fight early with, what's his name? And Big Country, whatever he was, and bam, gone.
I'm not going to be proud of what I'm going to say at the start. Because when I first met you, I thought you were full of shit.
Sure.
Not in terms of what you knew, in that I've never seen someone who had no ego.
Yeah.
In that I thought, oh, this is just a show. But then I'm like, he's with Marcus. So like you get your free pass and you're with Marcus right here.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, I don't think this is for show. And I was talking to John, and I think this strength coach, because it's so unusual that you would allow access to an athlete. Usually a lot of coaches are very guarded. Mm-hmm. They don't want to look bad.
Right.
And not saying we're going to make you look bad, but you were so open to going, actually, what are you guys doing and why? Because you wanted to learn.
Yeah.
And I remember talking with John. I'm like, he trains so different than I do. And then John's like, is that a bad thing? I'm like, I don't think so. Right. And that's when we went down to Strong Style and watched you were doing stuff.
Right.
That's when I realized like you weren't just doing strength and conditioning, you were doing everything.
Yeah.
And it really changed my perspective on one, how to not never judge people, but how to interpret what necessarily I was used to coaches going. Because we had bad experiences with coaches where we would actually help athletes, we try to help them, and then they just push it to a side because ego would take over.
Yeah.
Then you kind of come in with this different approach, and I'm like, oh, this is unusual. Like this guy can't be.
Right.
And kind of set the pace forward, especially for me, is like, oh, you have to be more open. This is the way forward to grow.
Right.
And to see that flourish, and then it made sense why Marcus had you guys in. But like you did open my eyes in terms of strength and conditioning is not just strength and conditioning.
Right.
And then John opened my eyes because he's a human MRI.
Right.
And knows joints. What I love with John is it starts at the highest level till it comes down, your hips are fucked.
Right.
And I can understand that. We can work from there. But it led to where we're at now, is that our goal, specifically like to give context to MMA, is my goal is not to make him bigger, faster, stronger. Our goal of strength and conditioning is to give the maximum opportunity for skill acquisition.
That's it.
The more skill they have, the better they're going to become.
That's it.
And part of skill is less injury, more endurance, more strength. You need to be strong as necessary, not strong as possible.
That's right.
And what's amazing is the power of one interaction. So one misjudging of character from my end led to a whole opening of another thing. And this was, I think, close to my year 7 or 8. But that was a pivotal point for me in my mentorship with Lou's style of mentoring.
You're right.
But were you, bringing it back in, were you always that open? Like was the ego always, from everything you went through, was that what left you open to everything?
Yeah. Yes. Because I was always humbled through prayer or through my, something would talk to me like I needed to be this way, or because I was blessed with these gifts to come up with these principles or philosophies and this mindset and be able to work with all these different groups. And again, not being the smartest guy in the world, but being able to perform it, speak to groups and do like it. Again, I never thought it would be me. It never was me. And so I've always been open to wanting to give, worried that I'm going to get burnt and things stolen. And, stuff always gets stolen. And I was always fearful, to be very candid, of, I was broke. I had the worst credit score after I went bankrupt. And so now I had to build this all back up, but I had all this knowledge, but I could not stop. It kept penetrating my brain that I can't stop being who I was supposed to be. Like, I had to give and do and trust and be selfless, and good things will come, and good things will come. And so, again, you look at mentors in a lot of ways. Like, you look back and say, what if you weren't open-minded? What if you were just closed doors? What if we never built this relationship? What if you just said, I don't need to talk to Bobby Kaleal? I don't know if I would have ever even came down if I felt the negativity to meet you and John then.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like, and then that could have been a closed door, a path that was never open, where the more brain power and energy, your guys' brain power, my energy maybe, and, the combination, but look what it could help do for others out there. But then let's say you add a Marcus brain to it with a different style, years of experience, scars from good business, bad business, athletes, issues. But what if we take some of your clients that and John's clients who are smart, and the people you work with now, and this combined knowledge, if we're not open, how do you learn it? How do you do it? Again, do I think there's some scumbag, weak-minded internet Instagram follower people who, don't get me started, what I mean, that haven't earned the right to call them who they are. But I can't focus on that anymore. That's negative energy. I'm on a mission with you guys to build this, opportunities for people. I want to know more, right? Don't you? You want to learn what you're doing wrong? I'm not making all the right decisions, man. But with people like you guys, where you want data, you want the facts. Let's see what's wrong. Let's respect what's right. Let's see where we are, and let's try to continue to grow and learn from one another. That's how we need to be.
Well, we've no choice, because the way our systems work and the way our internal network works is that we're only as good as our best efforts, because we have athletes first. And from Louis never developed a machine to make money. He developed a machine to fix a problem.
Right.
If it made money, that was great. But anyone who knew Louis, if the business and everything burnt down the next day, didn't care. Jim's good. We're all good.
Right.
So, learning from that to where I'm putting athletes first, and then everything should follow, is the right way to do it. Right. And that's why I'm very fortunate to have a Marcus. And I know he probably won't like me saying it, but he is the closest person I've seen to a Lou-esque figure. Not to the caliber of strength and conditioning, but the way he looks and assesses, not critiques, assesses. And having a person like that, and having this core group of people where we can exchange information.
Right.
And if your athletes get better, my athletes get better, it's phenomenal.
Right.
Everyone's getting better, right?
Yeah.
To bring it back into where I started with one of my biggest, I would say, growing steps, but it was a failure initially of my judgment, which that has never repeated itself since. What's one big failure you've learned from in terms of working with an athlete that you would stop yourself from doing now?
If I don't have a common ground with that person, I don't need to work with them. If they're not going to give me the Jessica, Sean Porter, Stipe type of mindset, the Connie Waxman approach to life and living, knowing that they're blessed to be in this sport, to want to get to the highest level. If you don't have the commitment, I can't do it. I don't have the energy anymore to do it like that. Yeah. Because I have so much I want to give, but if I'm giving and it's just getting wasted and spilled out, no way. So
my mind changed towards what you're saying, is that I would rather work with an athlete for being the athlete than for the money. Yeah. And when that changed, my whole perspective changed, because then I became very honest.
Yeah.
And the more honest I became with the athlete, actually the better the relationship.
Same way.
But I was so afraid to go, I need money. Commit, and then you don't want to take that step. But thankfully we had a hell of a group of athletes that came in that would let you know their mind straight away. And it was like a bunch of misfits, and Harold over there was one of them. But there was a sharing of shit talking information that goes, oh, this is the way to do it. When did that pivot happen for you?
It happened when I realized that when Connie got sick and Mary, and I realized, like, you know, and all these people were losing their businesses and people were miserable. I realized, like, you know, it was then. It was because you have to tell people to fight with their biggest fears happening in front of them. But then you get an athlete who's so gifted and blessed, and yet they don't want to give to the level that you know they should. And so it was roughly around that time. It was a new making of me, but I said, like, it was the rebirth of what was to come, you know what I mean? You know, of what I wanted to mold myself to be. And one of the things that kept disgusting me at that time was I was lessening myself for the money. You have a family, right? You want to you want to build a nest egg. Again, starting out in personal training is not the most luxurious, you know, you're not going to get loaded with money from that when you're begging and pleading to get a couple clients a few days a week. But you get these athletes that are not superstars, always made of money, yet, you know, you see some of them giving everything they got. And then you see some of these superstars who, you know, their egos, their heads don't fit through the door, but somehow they squeeze in, and then, you know, but they're not going to buy in. I can't do it anymore. I screw the money part of it.
Yeah.
It mauls me. And then if I fail, then what's a failure? You know, he fires me, then I look bad in the public eye because we had a philosophical difference when it does. You don't need the negative press or energy. You just don't. And the money part, I respect it more than anything. However, the price you pay sometimes and what you become and what you do is, like, you got to ask yourself, is it worth it? Is it worth that aggravation? When you can train some little kids who are going to absorb every bit of energy and love every bit that you're doing with them and do things that they don't realize, playing games in a way that, you know, they're just happy to be doing something and they don't realize it's helping their body, and then they grow and they follow your philosophy all the way up, man, like, it's different.
I'm not sure if it has changed now. I don't think it has, but there was never any part of college that taught me value. Like, what is your value and how to charge working with an athlete, You usually, this is your internship, this is your job, this is what the salary is.
Right.
Then you move into the private sector. We're like, well, what do you charge? What's everyone charging? And then, well, I spent all this money on my education, like, how am I going to get that back?
Right.
And then you go through the whole, it's a layer cake. You're at the bottom.
Yeah.
And you're eating crap and you're training everyone because you need to make money.
Right.
Then what do you do with that money?
Yeah.
Then it comes to a point of, well, how important is my mental health? When, like, turns out, like, it's pretty important.
Right.
And then you start figuring it out the hard way, but some have never figured it out. But I think that's a big open area that needs to be filled from an education standpoint, especially if you're going to invest to go to college, which I won't say I'm as convinced now is the best option for strength and conditioning. I always thought it should be a trade, that you need part college but part practical. Like, that's the approach for it. But for us to get a head start,
I think it could go down that. I think it's going.
I think it should.
It's great.
But to teach us, like, money, how does it work within the industry? How should you set yourself up? When can you get to the point where you don't have to, I won't say be dishonest, but not be as open for the sake of dollars, to where, like, okay, now I'm in a position to where I can try this, see where it goes. These are all steps that, I mean, Louis let me make every mistake known to man, and then just, like, of course it wasn't going to work.
Right.
But give me the security of where I worked here. But I'm like, wow, if I didn't have this network of coaches and people, well, I might be either a strength and conditioning coach, which is, a lot of them don't make money. Maybe we're making $20,000 a year starting off, and then trying to go to the private sector and charging someone $20 an hour.
Right.
Well, if we had the heads up, like, here's actually how you charge.
I never thought of that.
Here's kind of the process of, you're 5 years in. Well, now you got 5 years of experience. Well, what's that multiplier?
Right.
And we naturally got to it from trial and error, and to where, we have a nest egg that allows us, Like it is a privileged position to go, hey, we get to work with these athletes. We get to turn down athletes, which is, I never thought that would be a thing. And then we had to pivot out of our industry. These are all things we learned naturally. Well, not naturally, but I learned through my mentorship. You learned through your life experience.
Right.
But can you imagine if you got that in your last year of college?
No, I hope there's some collegiate and college professors listening, because if you think about that, that's pretty genius. You imagine if there was a few classes, that can help educate you on that whole. It's like a business degree in itself of learning how the world can go. From I made every mistake. I was charging pennies on the dollar to just get people in. I didn't know where to go. Asking for a contract with an athlete, you make it up at first, I just can think of some of the ones I put together. I don't know though, to be honest, Tom, if I think about it now, like maybe when we were going to school, they didn't even have those answers. Now they do though.
Yeah.
Now they do. I mean, it would be well worth it.
Well, I go back to a trade, and an electrician knows what they're going to charge when they go through trade school, and then to the caliber of apprentice. I know third-year apprentices that get paid a lot of money, and that get paid the minimum. But there's a range, and there's a reason there's a range, and that comes back down to the actual delivery of education for strength and conditioning. And hopefully, it will change. I think it has to. I think there's too much of blending over sports science, which I love sports science. But you're either in strength and conditioning, learning and having sports science assessing, giving you back feedback, or you're in sports science. Like, it's very hard when you're coming up to be this hodgepodge of things because you don't know what you want to be.
Right, and to take it a step further, imagine like if they were to, like Ball and Wallace with an American College of Sports Medicine approach, philosophy. Yeah. Cleveland State's, when you're done, you're getting your CSCS. Different, completely different philosophies in some respects. You know what I mean? And so you almost wish like they even taught courses in school, for a semester. Here's this methodology. Here's this methodology. Here's this method. Oh, now if you're certified as a strength and conditioning coach, and then you went and decided to do this, now think what you could offer. Like, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was out of school. I was just thankful to be done. I knew I loved the body and wanted to help and go and do. I opened up my first little studio in my garage. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I started just training people. It was, and then from there, you break it out. And if I could have learned and had a guide,
it would have been.
Yeah, right? It would have helped. It saves a lot of money.
Back to your role of director of performance, you have staff.
Yeah.
How important it is for you to develop your staff?
It's huge. I've only have 2 staff employees right now. We're working day and night, right now as we build this out. Staff's critical. We know we're building a performance lab there. And so we have like 85 technologies coming in there that a group is bringing in, and we're going to be their headquarters. And so we have to learn a lot. And so, but just from the basics, like tomorrow, we're having progression, regression training going on so that I can start to educate them on some of the breakdowns. So think about this. This is our first time working together, and we're in season for our sports right now. Basketball being the main one, men's and women's, and our post-grads, and swimming all this time of the year. This is in our indoor track and field. And so, and our wrestling. I'm seeing different injuries, different breakdowns with a blanket program with their correctives in between. Again, a basic program, correctives in between with some agility, quickness, and reaction work. And we're now modifying.
Yeah.
We have difference of opinions, I found out on. And so I'm learning, so you have to have a philosophical agreement amongst one another to be this fine, tuned machine. And why it's so important is because when these breakdowns happen, as they are now, people getting injured, wear and tear on the body, whatever it may be, when they're coming back, I want to know that if I'm leaving, my head strength coach with, so-and-so to get, fixed today, what's he going to modify the workout to? I want to not have to worry about that.
Yeah.
It should be automated. So it's critical. It's critical for a staff. Because think about all the strength coaches that come in, that come from, again, let's say I come from Ball and Wallace, an ACSM approach, you come from this place, the NSCA. great philosophy, great approach. How do you know we're going to agree? You want to do deadlifting. I want to do rear foot elevated. They pretty much achieve a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
You got to be on one accord.
That's a good point. And I like to ask this to coaches about exercises. Mm-hmm. Do you see them as exercises, or do you just, I know coaches who get so jazzed up about exercises. Well, I got this one, I got that one. To me, I'm more excited about assessing, getting the weakness, and finding the tool. Do you treat exercises as tools, or do you have specific diehards that has to be this one over that one?
I do some. But I don't, not necessarily saying I'm right. I'm very much a unilateral leg movement guy. I prefer a lunge, a rear foot. I keep using the example of this rear foot up, but because I worried about the different shapes and sizes that I have that are coming in now and all over the country, all over the world, who some good experience with lifting, some not. I like to know that I can get the most gain out of an exercise with not as much worrying to do.
Yeah.
And so I'm more of this, that may be one of them. I'm always a rotation guy type, so I always have to have some sort of a rotation in there, but no particular one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? No particular one. But if I had to say bilateral versus that's my answer, unilateral.
Do you take injuries personally?
Big time. To a degree, because of some coaching and philosophical differences with the sport coach. Mm-hmm. And I take it personally, but then I also have a problem with negligence on their part. Mm-hmm. And then I ask myself, well, is it my fault as a coach because I didn't force them to do the recovery better or do more mobility and stability? Did I allow them because of their attitude today and their ego that they came in here with because they did so bad the night before? I let them off a little bit. It's bad decision making on my part. You know what I mean? And so then I worry, well, is it my fault? You know what I mean? Is part of that my fault? Where am I at? Or is it, and I have to control my mindset too when it comes to, it's their fault. I kept telling them. I knew it was coming. We kept talking about it. They refuse to do their correctives. They think they're bullshit. You know what I mean? I don't need them. It's a waste of my time, blah, blah, blah. And so I take them personally from both of those respects.
Do you have a hard time building rapport with sports coaches?
No. I'm pretty blessed because I carry a pretty good energy. It's hard for them to argue my background because I'm always trial by error. Let me show you what I believe in. Let me do it. I don't, like when I went to the hostage rescue team the first time, there was 5 other Bobby Kaleals in there. I wasn't, but I went up and showed them everything and left it all on the table. And I was blessed to get the job.
Yeah.
But I have to live by that or I won't give. I won't be Bobby Kaleal, Sometimes does it backfire? Sometimes do I have problems? Sure, of course I do, But it's hard for a coach to argue something when you come there with pros and cons and you weight them a lot. And I try to do that. Mm-hmm. I try to look at the pros and cons for everything. And I'm open-minded to being wrong. I love if I'm wrong. And then as long as they don't throw it down my face and beat me in the ground with it, I'm okay with it. I don't begrudge them or break them down if they're wrong, But, I get along pretty well with coaches because I like to prove myself. So, like every day at Spire, I'm there at 6. The first group comes in at 6:45. So I'm there first. They see me working out. They know I'm putting it in. And they need to see that. So I think I earn a little respect, I think, that way.
Do you still carry athletes' losses as heavy now than when you started?
No. I carry the loss if I think I was a reason for the loss. If I know now that I gave what I could and it was out of my hands, what am I going to do? It was meant to be. It was, whatever. Back then, right? Yeah. You mature though, right? With everything else, you mature, Now, do I take losses, bad? Again, if I was a part of it, it's bad. I beat myself up. There's not a lot of things I can dwell on because of my attention, but I freaking, that will eat me alive. Yeah.
What helps you shift that fact?
Prayer and worship. Prayer and worship is my, I got to get my mind right. I got to get my demons out every day. I got to, it is because I'm human. And I tell myself, I'm doing the best I can. I try every day. I'm open. I'm selfless. I give, you know what I mean? And I work hard.
Yeah.
So, I got to let it go. So, but then you also got to be honest with yourself too if you were lazy.
Yeah.
Got to be honest with yourself if you didn't really do the homework you should have. If I don't watch the film, you know what I mean, the way I should have, but I pretend I do. You know what I mean? Or I failed to make sure they're doing some of their extras that they should do. So, you got to be open and honest with yourself. It's hard to, but you need to.
Yeah. It's, again, it's another thing you learn from experience. You had prayer and worship. I had Matt Brown.
Yeah.
He, hands down, one of the most influential athletes I worked with. But we all came back after a loss, and he's like, why the fuck are you so upset? Like, the whole room was just...
Right.
And he was like, we get to fight again. And, like, there's nothing. It's just... Because in that game, it's... No matter what happens, it's 50-50.
No doubt.
You're one puncher's chance away from
That's it.
anything happening. But I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good point. Like,
But right.
But then...
You weren't looking at it that way, though.
No. Everything was like to where I think when you're in what we do to the level that we do it, we get as involved. We probably shouldn't.
Oh.
We get more involved in every aspect because it's way... Sometimes it'd be easier if we just got the shit beaten out of us and they're fine over there because that's just the way you see it. You're like this because you get personally, right? You forget the business.
It's almost like you're building your resume in real time.
Yeah. Well, and to a lot of people will judge
Big time.
and like, well,
This guy was out of shape. How many times, I was lucky that Stipe had the mindset he did, and Jessica and Sean and them, they always made through their fights. You know what I mean? In that way. And it was because of their commitment. Just think if they didn't, though.
oh,
You know how many times you see it? They were out of shape. It was ridiculous. Horrible weight cut or blah, blah, blah. And you're like, that's me. You call yourself the performance coach mentally, physically, emotionally, nutritionally.
I
You're
can
like,
show you subjective data. People are like,
right.
not going to look at that.
yeah.
Trying to think where else.
Let me ask you this: where do you see technology going, and where do you see the balance of from, you see so much nowadays from how would you weight the warm up, the mobility, stability, those type of corrective stuff, the GPP stuff in the beginning of your versus the strength and power output type of it from when you started to today. Where are you seeing, the world and the evolution and how much should be truly put into, programs,
Technology used to worry me a lot in that I trust the technology. I didn't trust the person behind the technology. I didn't trust the person who was using it because there's such room for contamination. That's pretty much obsolete now. Technology become a lot more accurate.
Right.
However, I'm a slow adopter to it because we have a method and we have our own basic tool set of technology that's given us accurate data. But I'm seeing more and more where it comes into play. And to give you a very basic example, I hated the concept of a whoop, even though I got one on my arm right now.
Right.
I hated the concept of it until I understood it. And then I realized, I just hated that I had to learn something different that's so out of the norm. And now I've got no matter how accurate it is, it's going to be accurate to the pre and post, right? So if it's wildly off, once it's the same amount of off in post, we have data.
Right.
That's pretty objective. Now I have a strain level. Now understanding a strain level helps me dictate training density even better. And I'm getting better results in a faster time.
There you go.
And I'm like, okay, so there's definitely something, and we're getting into a world of efficiency.
Right.
And we've always said train as often as necessary, not as often as possible.
Right.
So what happens if you get to train less, get the same or more results out of it, and then well, what do you do that spare time? Back to skill. You learn more skill.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, this is where technology can step in and help. I see it more as a objective guide, or not even a guide, an objective feedback loop.
Sure.
That's telling me that's you're doing something right, you're doing something wrong. Where I right now, until I can fathom it more, and I'm not an expert in any shape, way, or form, I want to use it as a objective measure that will help me assess when I do recap on how everything is going. So when I do some reflection time of training, have my subjective, have my objective, and that's where technology comes in.
Yeah.
I do think we're going to get into a point where sports science, in some, is going to take a more of a significant role in the data optimization. But at the end of the day, I can't see it where it will totally take over, if that makes sense.
Right,
It might be just, it's you're still going to need the fundamentals of adaptable programming, adaptable feedback loops to get most out of the athletes. You're still going to need weights. You're still going to need
100%.
all these old school methods with new school feedback loops. That's how I see it going efficiently. But with what you're doing with the speed of, I remember when Joel Jameson came out with HRV.
Yeah.
Kind of pioneered that. I can't remember, was it Omega or whatever it was called. People are like, what is this? And now HRV is mainstream. The amount of journals coming out, HRV for long-term health benefits. You're like, 5 years ago, you're like, what is this?
Right.
So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I guess it's a long-winded answer to say, I don't know. I trust it more now as a feedback loop than I've ever done. I'm still not at the level of I would trust myself to put in data sets and let that take care of training. Where are you on it? Because you're very much in that.
I'm now into it.
Yeah.
But I don't understand it all. But to your point, it's forcing me to learn. And that was my sticking point was, do I have the brain power to learn? But I'm realizing now that if I put the athletes through the steps, it's the best way for me to learn. Then I see the data that's coming out. Then I could see, where I was wrong, or I could see where I was right or hoping for. But I think that it's still very new. I still think that it's a way to go. The big thing for me is I'm trying to balance. It's almost as if there's more injury now than before. And, where do you see the balance of the functional mobility work, the internal versus the external versus the heavy strength training type of work? Where do you see that balance of? And again, are you someone, I like to sprinkle it throughout. I'm that guy that sprinkles the movements throughout. I do a basic warm-up, I play some fun and games, and then I incorporate the correctives throughout in between the strength movements and stuff to kind of, again, the yin and the yang type, you know what I mean? I want to get, the strength or power movement out of it, but I also want to get the small little muscle groups to open up and to feel and to propriocept, and to know that it's all working. What is your approach? And do you think that more trainers, strength coaches, because you have this mix, of skill sets, should move more to that type of joint integrity, mobility, stability type of work, or versus the strength and power?
I think even before that, everyone needs to move to more accurate assessments. And then if you have an accurate assessment, it makes everything else you're doing so much easier. But what is an accurate assessment, right? Initially we would external measures, right? A lot of the combine is external measures of strength, and but if we start internally, and then you see where your joints are, and just to give context, normally it's the hip, any ball and socket, hip and shoulder, and then that creates your hierarchy of importance. If the joints are terrible, they get prime priority. So we mightn't even touch a weight. We haven't got that extreme a case, but it's a possibility that we'll just get the joints back to where we can actually train.
Right.
So it comes down to the assessment. Then if you have someone who assesses that they're in the spectrum of, just say you're 70%, you're okay, now we can actually incorporate it. To me, it can be done at the start or at the end. It's different than your way. I'm not saying your way is right or wrong, because we're all getting the results at the end, right? But for me, and the way I run my setup is that it's either at the start, it's part of the warm-up, part of the cool down. And that's just with the external workout. They have to have a dedicated day to, like, so they have to, because I don't have athletes every day, but they have to do something. And this is stuff that all you need is a space that you can work out your joints internally. And this system wasn't developed by me. The system that I've been working on was with John Quinn. So John has really developed this internal strength model, which bases a lot of stuff coming from FRC, which is Dr. Andrea Spina's work, to where now we bridge it together and we have this system coming along. And listening to how you do it, you've got an interpretation of it already. You're just doing it in between work, which is very interesting to me. And I think that comes down to preference.
Sure.
Because it's our end goal, like no matter what system or philosophy you want, if you're training athletes, you want them to get better.
Right.
So that's common ground off the bat. You don't want injuries, you want them to get better.
Right.
So then how do we share this information? How do we get forward? Well, everyone needs joints. You need you need accurate access to these joints. And the strange thing with the body is it will make you believe you have a shoulder, and it'll make you believe you have a hip when you mightn't have any capacity in there. And then randomly you'll tear your ACL, or randomly your ankle will blow out, or randomly you'll get lower back pain.
Right.
Well, it's not random to us. Because of our assessment, we know that depending on how strong you are, what level of capacity you have in your joint, and what is your sport, we can pretty accurately estimate what your risk of strength or injury is.
Injury would be.
And that comes back down to, so to round it back up, is get a training hierarchy based on assessment.
The assessment's the key then.
Yeah, assessment is everything. It's our job.
It's your starting ground. It's your base.
Especially
you know where you're at.
When you work with, I don't work with high numbers of athletes. So I work between 5 and 10. So that allows me to do really accurate assessments. And usually I'll have them for 8 weeks. So I have time.
Yeah.
When you get athletes that come in for 2 weeks, usually it's just going to be general sleds and joint, because we make the biggest difference to joint training. So back to get an accurate assessment and then figure it out where you can put it in. But if you're not assessing correctly, then basically you're answering all the wrong questions. And a lot of people get into that, like, well, I've answered that question correctly. You have, but you've asked the wrong question.
And so, and do you think, like, you know, when you look at these kids, like youth, like, do you think, like, there's no difference, right? Why not? Why can't they go through the same, if not a similar assessment?
Oh, they should.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, so that you could start to create this, you know, so that you can follow them all. You got the consistency all the way up. It really shouldn't matter whether you're a child or whether you're an athlete or whether you're a corporate America person. Like, if you could do a basic assessment on someone and you could find this common ground or this base to start with, it should be able to create, or give you that scale. Like you said, look, you're prone to a potential this. You may not see it, you know, but it also, as a child, you know, this approach allows you to maybe steer them in a direction, educate the parents. That isn't the key. Like, you know, you have so many of these dads that, you know, I was guilty of it, you know, even being a strength performance coach, you know, wanting my kid to, you know, get the extra and do all this, and he's got to get stronger. Well, all due respect, I look at it a lot different now. You know what I mean? You
want to create assets. So if I work with kids, and I'm like really excited to work with high school kids, is that, to me, my ultimate goal is to have coaches come back and go, all the kids that came through your system were assets. They were huge assets in the weight room, to where they knew what they needed. They knew how to spot. They knew how to create that culture. Because the weight room creates a culture, right? Culture creates consistency. Then you insert training method. If you have no culture, you got no consistency. Right. Training methods don't matter. Right. So that's what I go back down to high school coaches are the most important. Yeah.
And we need more of them. And some schools don't even have it. It's a joke.
It's ass backwards.
They have these booster clubs that keep buying new jerseys and stuff, but yet they can't hire a strength coach.
Or you have unbelievable weight rooms with no one to run it.
Yeah.
But then there's an exception. Then you have Texas. And Texas takes it super serious when it comes to especially high school football. And we could learn a lot from the investments they make in there. But you make assets of kids, you're going to reduce concussion rates. If you look at the work of Marcus Sanovich, NFL strength coach, left the NFL to focus on neck training to reduce concussions, has a concussion protocol, realized it's more important to do it at a high school level.
Sure.
Because once you get your first one, then it's way easier.
Yeah,
so why not start here? I'm like, well, that's a great way to look at it. Why not start at the high school level?
Yeah.
To me, that's the thrill, going from high school, going to collegiate, because we've worked with the athletes that are here.
Sure, yeah.
They're driven to an extent. There's a few of them that still chase perfection, even though they know it doesn't exist. They chase because they want to be the best they can be. But a lot of them are already there. I said we could give them a Bosu ball,
right,
a red band, and off they go, and they're phenomenal. But if we get these high school kids, and we can teach them to be their own coaches, like it doesn't mean they need a friggin' degree. It means that they know how to train themselves.
Sure.
They know how to spot. They know how to motivate each other. They know, hey, why did you shift forward or back? Hey, your knees are coming. Give them simple tools.
Yeah.
Then if you go to the college weight room, you're going to be an asset to the coach. So you mightn't just be there to be a player, but now you're an asset to the team. And guess what? You can keep training and training and training as they're starting, and who knows where you end up.
You're right. Passing those people. And how many people do you know that were trained improperly, the wrong way, and you think of the athletic potential they never even got close to be achieving, and they could have been like these superstars.
Westside for years was like a last chance saloon. We would get all these athletes who came to us as their last chance, and I'm like, and they always say the same thing. I wish I came here first.
Yeah,
because we have a system, we have a method of hierarchy,
right.
And we were led by a man who is willing to do absolutely anything.
Trial and error, fail, succeed, boom, boom.
And it's all about you can solve all the problems in the gym. And then that's where John and myself took that philosophy and we're in this box. Yeah. The answers are all in this box. Yeah. So if it's internal, if it's external, it's all in here. And so far it's been pretty accurate. And how do we make it pretty accurate is we learn to ask the right question at the right time. Mm-hmm. And then we learn to keep asking questions. So you have feedback loops weekly.
Yeah.
So there's never any room for inaccurate data. There's no long periods of time. But we've got a very privileged setting in that we get them for long spans. We've had athletes go from the journey from high school to pro levels. So now we've got these longitudinal things. And we've learned from pros to where media day, obligations, all these things throw training way off.
Sure.
To where, again, you're not taught in school.
Right.
But it comes back down to the assessment. We know where that's going to lie. We know before fight camps for fighters, post-testing, what they have to focus on a fight camp. So their post-testing leads into the 8-week fight camp. Then we're like, hey, if you just focus on these 4 things, you will maintain your gains.
Right.
So that's all to where we're a small cog. You go refine your skill, go kick ass, come back. You wouldn't have gone backwards.
Right.
In fact, some of them, because of the training carryover,
get some gains.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it all comes back down to assessment.
Right.
And then you can plug in whatever you need because no matter what your methods are, you're still answering the right questions. And then if you're getting the right answers, you have to do it on a weekly basis. You can't do it on a monthly. Right. So once you keep to that, then we'll all end up roughly at the same foundational methods. But that's what we have found. And if we get more into, we have a way of training, not the way, it's a way of training.
Yeah.
And then you have a way of training. We share notes. You're like, oh, I can take some of that. You can take some of this. Right. Your injury rate is way down. Your success rate is way up.
Right.
Well, then we're successful.
Right. And if you can feed that to a parent to understand it for their kids, a lot of times what happens is, these people who are, again, I give them all the credit in the world, but yet some of their stuff comes across too high level. Parents won't understand. If you can help educate the child and to where and as well as educate the parent on this basic assessment is giving us our answers, and this is what we have to follow. And from this assessment, we got these exercises, this staple that at least you can feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
That I think it also helps the parent.
Yeah, hugely.
Breathe a sigh of a breath of fresh air, in a way of like, okay, think they're in good hands. You know, I
Yeah.
think that, you know, and it even it'll level the playing field a little bit too. And for those who don't have at least the greatest weight rooms, at least you now have an assessment and a way to where you can help guide them
Yeah.
to what exercise they can do and stuff like that. And again, I think it's critical. And it's funny that you don't have all these high schools pushing for these strength coaches to come on in.
I think they don't know what to ask. I think like it's not giving them an easy out, but I think high schools budget is constraints. They're then sometimes parents are afraid, and I can understand that. Really, if I got to sit down with a parent, I'm like, we're teaching your child. First of all, they're safe.
Right.
Every parent wants to know their child is safe. We're teaching them goal setting. That's a big thing. Now they can set accurate goals and achieve them. So that's success. We're teaching them to be part of community, which is what you want. And now they're part of a positive culture. That's the beauty of a weight room.
Right there alone is more than what
Like,
they're
to-
getting that in just a normal.
If a byproduct is you got a college scholarship, phenomenal. If not, you now have a skill set that will carry over to anywhere.
How about just you'll be able to take care of yourself the rest of your life?
Huge.
I mean, again, how many people you don't know that? You know,
Yeah.
getting out of high school.
I could talk to you for hours, but time is against us. I have one last question to end on this, and hopefully this is the first of many conversations, Bobby. If you had one question to ask your dream guest, what would it be?
My dream guest.
Your dream interview, just say any athlete, coach, person, what would be one bit of information you had one question to ask them that we'd want to know that would make you better?
I love finding out what people would do differently that either got them to the place they are at in their life or stopped them from getting to a place. I love to learn as much as possible from people's gains and their mistakes, not to disparage or anything, but to learn. Just to learn. That's it.
Where can they find more about Spire?
Right on the website, you know.
We'll put link below
Spire
for you.
Institute. Yep. It's we're growing it. It's different. Stay tuned. I'll let you know. And again, we're hoping to really to make something so different with what we want to bring in here to help level the playing field. And I think we have an opportunity to stay neutral and do that.
Bobby, thank you.
I appreciate it. It was great.